turn the page.
What? Page?
You turn the page.
We turn the page, but we have to go back because we have questions. Kufnun Hey, in the bottom, very last line on Kufnun Hey. Beginning with parentheses. They were discussing, up to that point, the principle, what we call emunah, or a kashrus, a connection to Elokus, that is from a higher source than the neshama itself. That was from the source of the neshama, than the neshama itself. The neshama has a cleavage to Elokus, beyond that which the neshama can explain to itself what is going on. There's something connecting it and drawing it to Elokus from a higher effect, from a higher source. It's what I call makif. And it's also referred to as mazle chazi, the mazl of the neshama. Mazl means the source of the neshama, the neshama flows from. There it sees the truth of the Elokus. And once it...
Mazle what?
Mazle.
No, the second word.
Mazle chazi.
Mazle chazi.
Chazi?
Chazi means sees.
Sees?
Seed, S-E-E. So it sees the truth of Elokus. And that sighting is directly transferred to the neshama. It does the neshama what it sees, and thus the neshama is bound to Elokus. Bound to Elokus at its level, but it's bound to Elokus in the sense that it cannot possibly draw away and do something which is contrary to the principles of Elokus. Because it sees the truth of the unity of Elokus, so how can you go elsewhere? Now we go to the last line, and that is presented in the form of a parenthesis. And it begins with the word b'tzorich leim. B'tzorich leim means we have to say. What is the implication of the word b'tzorich leim? We have to say. B'tzorich leim implies that although this may be the direction that we would think, this may be what we would actually attribute to this connection that Neshama to Elokus. Nonetheless, tzorich, we have to say that this is not it, meaning that this connection to Elokus is deeper than what we are talking about. We have to say the ain zeh, that this what we are discussing, we're calling about emunah, that it's bounded with the Elokus and they cannot separate. This is not inyan ha'izkashus atma shel hanshama, the principle excuse me, of izkashus atzma. Again, the word atzma is the only way I have to translate it is essential, the essence. The word essential seems to be meaning the importance. No. Essential does not mean the necessity. as essence. Essentially, that which flows from its essence. The connection of the neshama on the essence level of the neshama. The atmos in the atmos. Again, the word essence we started yesterday, and we have much difficulty with relating to this. And we're discussing it and so forth. The reason we have such a difficulty in relating to the principle of essence, iskashus atzmis, is that we all under the influence of the worldly view of the worldly reality. And that influence is so pervasive, meaning it touches of any part of our thinking. And it's so convincing because it's very logical. But as a result, it blinds us to see a profound truth that we definitely see, but we are blinded to it. We're blinded to the extent that when we come to talking about it, we say, that's child's place. That's not real. The real thing is the logical process that we've identified.
This statement's coming in contrast to what we said when we introduced the shir, right?
Yeah, not in contrast. This is an addition. So to say this.
Well, it says einze inyan iskashus atzmi.
This is, and it doesn't come. It doesn't really.
Oh, it
reach that.
doesn't go far enough.
That's right. Doesn't reach that.
To say that the imuna of the neshama is rooted above it itself.
That's right. It's called iskashus atzmis. Iskashus atzmis.
Which is to say, we're going to say deeper than this. That is mimazle.
Than the source of the neshama.
Fine. Okay, good.
Right. This is not the discussion of Nashon. Well, let me finish that line and go on just a little further. Shazehu, which is Iskashus Atzmis of the Nashon. And I'll explain the word Atzmis. Now I'll take time to kind of pin it down and get us recognize it. This is Mipnei, the reason that there is a Iskash, the reason that there is such a thing as Iskashus Atzmis of the Neshama, the Atmos Ein-Sof. It is due to the fact shemushroshim be'atzmos. It is due to the fact that they're mushosh, that they're rooted in us. So when we say rooted in atzmos, we are immediately smart and we say rooted means it comes from there. The only source, the only thing that can create the neshama is the atzmos, and therefore that creates it. So what is the additional notch in saying that it's mushash in atzmos, it's rooted in atzmos? Why not say it's coming from there and he creates it? So, being that we started already before yesterday, so we will go the next step. The word mushrosh. Let's focus and understand the principle, explain the following principle. You have a job. The reason you have a job is because you need money to pay rent. This job provides you for paying your rent. Would it be correct to say that your ability to have this apartment where you live is rooted in this job? Hello?
Yeah.
What? What you answer my question?
No.
No. No.
No.
Yeah.
No. Why not? He pays you rent. If not for that, you wouldn't be able to hold on to the apartment.
You can get it from someplace else.
You have no other resource. You have something else, you'll be another job. It'd be a similar thing. It's true, you're not bound with this provider, with this employer. You go to a different employer. But it's still rooted in having a job.
The job is the means.
One second. You're jumping ahead. Fine. I should rephrase my question. Is your ability you're having the apartment rooted in the fact that you can have a job? There is this job, another job, but you can have a job. You have the ability to hold on a job. And that is the root of the apartment that you have to have.
It's still not.
It's still not. All right. So now that we pinned down the question, what do they mean by rooted? Why not? If not for this job or for any job, you wouldn't even think of renting an apartment. Or nobody will think of letting you use their apartment. Let us rephrase this slightly, and things will surface. You are independently wealthy. You have no problem, no difficulty in paying for your rent. You go and you rent an apartment. You rent the apartment because you can afford it. Is that correct to say?
No.
You rent an apartment because it's the nature of a human being to have an apartment.
Because the apartment is something which you personally identify as your lifestyle, not because you're able to afford it. Although you won't be able to rent it without being able to afford it. Therefore, your ability to afford it is not in the category of being the root for renting the apartment. We're coming close a little bit to narrowing down the word root. If you could not afford the apartment, say, I can't afford the apartment, I don't need one. Would that fit? Would that make sense? Is that how people think?
I hope not.
I can't afford an apartment, therefore I don't need one. There is such a thing. Let's examine it. A person who cannot afford an apartment, he's so depressed, he's so out of sorts, that he falls asleep wherever he is. He doesn't consider his life as anything that has to be provided for. He's sleepwalking. Having an apartment is something that touches the essence of a person. No, I haven't have an apartment. I cannot sleep in the street. I have an apartment not because I fall asleep. I have an apartment because I am a human being. Completely different source, a different definition of the physical necessity of having a place to be. There we are coming closer to identifying the principle of shoirish, root. Root, in this case, becoming closer to sin, it is not a provider on a practical level, on a functional level. It's a provider on an essential level, on an essence. Not essential as a necessity. Because if he doesn't have an apartment, he sleeps anyway. But he is lacking something. Not the comfort. He's lacking as a human being. He's not really living a human life. His essence is not allowed to express itself. This is what I mean, mushrosh, root. I want to take this a step deeper. Where is that concept, that principle of mushrosh come from? If you ask the wisest of all men, Darwin, he says there's no such thing as mushrosh. Everything is circumstantial. You will call it the guidance of the no such thing as a real necessity, a real reality. But Hashem, we survived that onslaught. As logical and as convincing it is, he failed. Baruch Hashem. We need an apartment because we need an apartment. Because of who we are. Not because of our practical necessities. Where does that come from? This is really cannot be attributed to some kind of practical experience, a worldly experience. I don't worldly belong the principle. The world doesn't say that you have to be in an apartment. You have to be protected against the elements. There's no worldly necessity to have an apartment for yourself. The worldly part of you does not necessitate that you should have a house for yourself. If that's the case, where then does that come from? This is such an important principle over here. And this is where, I mentioned Darwin, the whole skewed thought process comes from. Where he did away with the creator principle. Things occurred only on the practical level. It made so much logic out of it, and people got blinded by it. Excuse me. The source of the reason that there is such thing as shoyr as atzim is that we have a creator who conceptualized and defined us before we came into being. And he gives us of his spirit and of His truth, of His reality, He imbued us into us that reality. I put you into the world, but it doesn't define who you are, what you are. You are my creation. You represent me. You have all the necessities, but that's to accommodate your presence in the world. It doesn't define who you are. Again, where then does the person get the principle of his being a human being? Not from his worldly experience. He gets it from the declaration of the Creator who made him. Regardless how you behave, if you choose to sleep in the street, you choose to behave like an animal, whatever you do, my definition of who you are remains. You can abuse that definition. You can ignore it. It's your choice. But that definition remains. Because that is the intent with which I created you. You are my creation. You have no presence except for the fact that you're my creation. And thus, the principle with which I created you, and that which defines what you are, that can never be lost, can never be taken away, because your whole being over here is due to the fact that I created it. That remains forever and ever. Regardless how you pervert it, and whatever the so to speak, the worldly experience leads you to, that cannot possibly be changed. This is what's called, this is your essence. This is the fact of your being here, is expressed in this principle. Not the circumstance of your being here, the fact of your being here.
So the human being is different than any other creature because he reflects the Creator in this world.
Because he's what?
He represents.
Every creature has an essential definition by the Creator. The human being has a very unique type of definition. Pierre said that the human being will represent me in the world. And that puts him.
But why is it called? Being rooted? Everything is rooted in God.
The whole creation is rooted in God.
Yeah. So what does?
But the whole creation does not reflect Him. Only the human being. He said, "This human being is going to reflect me."
So in this reflection, we call rooted.
Yes.
Why?
Because that's what it says. It reflects me. That's what I am. It's Amen Musayim.
I don't understand what the meaning of rooted comes in.
What did I explain the whole rooted is? Rooted is it represents it. Where such thing come from? Like we said before. We've been jumping down a little bit, we're asking questions too prematurely. He explained, where does it come from, the idea that a human being needs a home? Needs a roof over his head. Needs a normal dwelling place. Where does that come from? So does it come from worldly necessity, or is it a different, has some other kind of source for it?
Other kind of source.
Okay, what is the source? And where does it come from? Where does this source come from? This source, this is what we said, is the fact that he was created, and the intent of the Creator in creating him, that's his source, that's his shortage. That intent is the Creator's invention. There is no other compelling element that makes it be. It is the Creator that said, I'm putting myself in here. This is why this is called the source. Shortage. The reason that the world needs a human being, as God says, and you need a human being to rule the world, is, okay, here's the next step, is because the world, the whole creation, the whole presence of the world is a divine creation. If it's a divine creation, it presents divine principles. If it's haphazard, and it has no order, no ruler, no guide, that doesn't reflect a godly creation. That reflects a Darwinian wildlife, free for all. But that's not what the world is. The world is not a wilderness. The world reflects the fact that there is a Creator.
Since we're on this topic,
Yes, please.
it does seem like Hashem sets it up so that it looks like, if not a jungle, then a pretty cutthroat economy, so that a person can have real concerns about paying his rent. That seems like part of the design. While at essence, yes, he's a human being and he should have his own place and it's a given and it's not dependent on the job and all of those things we said. On the other hand, God did set it up in a way that...
Okay, so you have a cash on God, but okay, I'll take it up because I don't want to cut corners like that. Fine, but when you have time for this. So the answer to that is, as it happens, as a result of the fact of what you described, that a human being has worldly necessities, and which seem to him to come from a worldly circumstance. He has a job and so forth.
He wishes he had a job.
He wishes he had a job. That entire lifestyle that God provided for the human being is representative, perfectly representative of the fact that he is a divine creation into the world.
Again, what? The fact that he has all these expenses, necessities, is indicating
and he
that...
has to work for it. Is in that clearly states, that reveals the divine presence in the world. How so? The Gemara says, did you ever see an animal looking for food? They find wherever they are. How come a human being has to work and design a means for sustenance? He can't eat grass. He has to plow the field and plant wheat. and then he has to grind it to what's going on. The simple principle that this reveals is, in fact, that the human being represents the correlationship, the union between the superworldly with the world. And that is, in fact, his function in the world. Yes, he has to work and has to provide his sustenance on the worldly level, but he has to first humanize it. He has to first elevate it. He must not succumb to it and stoop down to it. When he eats, he has to eat at the table with a spoon. So that the divine principle, this is a divine world. It's a divine world, not divinity per se. It's a divine world. To accept, to force the world to recognize that yes, both it's worldly and divine, this is where the necessity, this is where all these things come together. He must eat like Hagel the dog, but he must not eat like the dog. He has to raise the food to a human level. Why? Because it's a divine creation. There's a divine purpose. So yes, the answer to your question, God made it so that the human being has to toil for his support. But in the toiling itself, he recognizes that the success of his toil is not due to his toil, it's due to the divine blessing. This is why, when he picks up a piece of food, before he eats it, he makes a bracha. Because he recognizes, yes, I toiled for it. I planted the field, the seed, and I harvested it, and I ground it, and I baked it. And so on. That's not what I'm eating.
Well,
I'm eating the divine spirit that made me.
Right.
What made the wheat capable of creating bread? It is God.
Right. In this description, we went from the difficulty with earning parnasa to what an opportunity it is to get involved with the material world and how everything is made available. There does seem to be another pshat, and you don't have to look too far, where people seem to be suffering with this, that there's almost a curse. We were banished from Gan Eden by the sweat of your brow, and there's some people without parnasa, there's some people working very hard who never get ahead, never get enough, where there seems to be something...
This something is...
The Fi Torah, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This something is that a human being will always, because he's a human being, his life in the world will necessitate for him to recognize that he is here not by accident. He's not a reigning product. He's a created entity. Therefore, when he needs something, the first place he turns to is to his creator.
And we're saying not only he's not a Darwinian product, he's also not banished from God's care. Because it does seem like the story of Chet Etzadas, by the sweat of his brow, and he's banished from resources.
This sweat of his brow, this is what keeps him connected to God. If not for that, he would get lost in his own pleasures.
But that's to say his efforts would not be in vain, and that there's divine providence on him. Not that he's really banished to toil endlessly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Toil, and then during the toil, you ask God, please bring success to this wheat. And you know what happens? God responds to his prayer. And he has a blessed harvest. And his harvest is so plentiful that he can feed other people.
Man through the hate rejected responsibility for himself and everything, and as a result, God gave him responsibility.
Huh.
And so,
The principle in this is, when he was in Gan Eden, he only knew of God. He didn't have it. But because of the chet, now it is necessary for him to recognize God through the worldly process.